For all of you, it's my pleasure to have on the Sam Lesante Show a person who we admired and respected for many years, Fess Parker. Fess, it's a pleasure to be up here on your beautiful winery.
Thank you, Sam. Santa Barbara County has a lot to offer, and we're delighted that we can be out here and pursue our goals.
Well, Fess, I'm going to ask you some really interesting questions. For all the people back in northeastern Pennsylvania, and for those people who'll be watching the show in the state of California, for all my friends out there, were you born Fess Parker? Is that a stage name?
My father was christened Fess Parker in 1900. I came along in 24 and turned out that that was my name as well. I have a son, Fess III, and there's Fess IV on the ground. He's about 3 years old. And it's an interesting name, and in Old English it means proud. I'm sure my grandmother didn't know that because it was a surname. Dr. Simeon Fess was a United States Senator from the Midwest and president of Antioch College before that, and a friend of Will Rogers. Will Rogers thought that his name, Dr. Simeon Fess, thought Simeon was really a funny name, and so he teased him a lot.
Well, you weren't born in Tennessee now.
Born in Texas, Fort Worth, Texas.
And you still have relatives in Texas?
I'm sure I do. I probably wouldn't recognize them, nor they me, but have a lot of friends there, and we still have a little property there. Grew up in a little town called San Angelo. Went through first grade through high school there, went into the service in 1943, and almost 3 years in the Navy. Got my degree from the University of Texas in 1950.
What was the degree in?
American history.
Is that right? Now, when did you first then become involved in acting? And what was your American history a little different between acting? You didn't go to acting school, or did you go to acting school?
No, I didn't. I watched films. I was a movie fan. I enjoyed the outdoor action films that I had an opportunity to see in the 30s and the 40s, and decided after I graduated to come out to California and try my hand. I realized early on that movie actors are just working people. There's no great big magic about it. It's a business, and I figured I could find a place in it. So I decided to give myself 3 years to see if I could make a living. And in the 35th month, Walt Disney had me over to the studio, and ultimately I met him, and he approved me for Davy Crockett. He had seen me in a film called Them that I'd made a few months earlier for Warner Brothers. And I just had a small part, little comedic part. But he uttered the famous words, "Who's that?" You know. So.
Well, your first film was called Them?
Well, no, my first film was a picture that I made with Joseph Cotton and Shelley Winters in 1951, and I worked quickly with a picture with Tony Curtis and Piper Laurie. The next picture was with Gary Cooper, and so on. So I worked in about 16 or so pictures with small parts.
I want to go back just a little bit. Many people, they look at Hollywood, and I want to go to Hollywood, I want to be a star, I want to be on television. When you came here, what did you do? Did you have a resume? Did you have anything? Did you go knocking on doors? Did you get an agent? What was the process?
Well, serendipity is my favorite word.
Yes, it's mine too.
It's a good one. And at the end, I spent a year at the University of Southern California in graduate school studying history of the theater. And way back in my mind, I thought, well, if I don't do acting, maybe I'll teach. Anyway, it was an unformed idea, and at the end of the second term when I was writing my thesis, which I never finished, they were looking for 4 people to put into the national company of Mr. Roberts, starring Henry Fonda, and they wanted these 4 people to go up and go into the show in San Francisco and the whole summer was San Francisco and Los Angeles. Well, I looked out, and I was one of the 4 that got into the show, and so that gave me access to talking with Fonda and Lee Van Cleef, Jack Klugman were members of that cast. And at the end of the summer, I said, well, listen, I've heard these fellows and what their expectations are, so I think I'll really make an effort. And so I came back on Labor Day weekend of '51 to stay for that 3-year period. And the way that you ultimately get into films, there were 3 problems. 1, you had to have an agent. Number 2, you had to work in pictures. And number 3, you had to have a union card. And you couldn't get the union card unless you had a job in pictures, and you couldn't get a job in pictures unless you had an agent, probably, unless you were Lana Turner in the soda fountain scene. Mm-hmm. So after Mr. Roberts, I learned inadvertently that whatever you were asked, you know, are you a baseball pitcher? Can you pitch? The answer is yes. Do you skydive? A little bit, you know. So I got the book of the agents from the Screen Actors Guild, and I started with the A's. Nobody wanted to talk to me until I got to the R's. Talked to one agent. That resulted in my being sent out. They didn't think enough of this deal to drive me out there, but I found my way to Warner Brothers for an appointment. They were thinking of me because I had a Texas accent for the Will Rogers story that was about to be made. Michael Curtiz was a famous director doing that. But the casting director sent me to Bryony Foy, one of the 7 little Foys, who was a producer at Warner Brothers, because I had told him that I could pitch. He'd asked, I said, of course. So I went in, and this fellow jumped up, Bryony Foy jumped up, and he said, holy smokes, you look the part. He said, can you act? I said, yes, sir. Now, where did you act? I said, well, in high school. Well, where else? Well, in college. Where else? Summer stock. I was being pushed to the wall. Well, he said, we're going to give you a test. Called the director in. They gave me the script, and they said, 2 or 3 days from now, we'll have you in, and we'll do the test for the Grover Cleveland Alexander story about the famous baseball pitcher. Called me 2 days later and said, we're not going to do the test. I said, well, I'm sorry and disappointed, of course, but who did you choose? He said, well, we had an actor here under contract at Warner Brothers. His name is Ronald Reagan.